Hello again, it's tubalcain, your YouTube shop teacher, and this is casting the small drill press vise tips number 447. Stand by for some excitement. This is the last in a series of videos about this little vise casting and what was Casting Specialties and what was Peterson products. So if you haven't seen the other ones, you might want to, but this is tips 447. Underlined. I had an expert consultant that I talked to about this particular video regarding the gating and the risering of it, and his name is Tom. He's from Florida, and his YouTube channel is Sandrammer. Now watch his video entitled Assisting Tubalcain Mr. Pete 222 with the project, because that is an answer, a video answer to me on some questions that I asked him, but he made it public for all to see. So check that out. He is a Navy man and is extremely knowledgeable on casting. That's Tom in the upper left hand corner, and this is the video that you should watch, Assisting Tubalcain. So check that out. Now Tom probably cut his eye teeth in the Navy on this book by NavPers, Molder 1 and C, and I often use it for a reference. I've had it for 50 years. So what am I doing in this video? Well, these are the 3D printed patterns, and I'm going to make aluminum castings only in this size, this scale, which is about 2.5 inches. And I'll be using this pattern, and all that has been covered in the previous video, so check that out. I'll be using this 3-piece split pattern rather than the 1-piece pattern, which was troublesome in regards to withdrawing the sand from this slot. I'll be mentioning Tom and when I start gating this, which will be later in the video, and I'll pour this, maybe not on camera, but I'll show you the finished project if it's a success, and I think it shall be. So let's go on out to the molding bench. Here I am at the bench, and in order to make this casting and have room for those big risers on the end, I'm forced to use a much larger flask. That's a 12 by 14, and this is what I normally use, a 10 by 12 with a 3-inch depth. This is 4-inch depth. This flask is incredibly heavy, even empty. So I really struggle moving these around when they're full of sand, and I avoid using these big flasks at all, if at all possible, but I do have to use it in this video. But you will notice that in none of my videos do I lift the flask off of the bench and put it on the floor. I do my pouring up here so I can avoid that heavy lifting. Alright, now in order to do this, I am placing the pattern, just the main part of it, in the drag. This is the drag, because the whole thing will be flipped over, and it will be put in there in this position, and there's plenty of room for the risers on each end, and the risers will look, you know, something like this. So you can see why I need room. Also, I need room out here for the gating system as well, and the jaw pattern, which is going to go in here, which I'll show you in just a second. So that's the placement in the flask. There's the jaw. I'll kind of move that over to the side there so it's out of the way, and a little parting dust, and I'm ready to go. I'll speed this up because it's been shown countless times. Now to flip this baby over. Boy, is it heavy. I got to try to roll it. Now I remember why I don't like using those big flasks. See what we got here? And then, of course, assemble the pattern. Put a little parting dust on and I'm ready. You know what, you can hardly see the movable jaw, or the movable jaw from here. Okay, what I'm going to do then is run a sprue, tapered sprue, right in this position, and I mark the flask. You might see chalk marks on here, so that I will know where to make that when the sand covers this. So that's what I will do from the outside. The other gates and risers and everything I'm going to cut after I separate the cope from the drag, and then I think it'll be easier to do and locate them properly. So I'll go ahead and sift the sand and ram this side and then separate it, and I'll get back to you. You don't need to see this, as it'll be so similar to what I just did on the first side. Okay, both the cope and the drag are rammed up good and solid, and I've already located the sprue, and going into that depth, and I will carve out a pouring basin there. Can you see the pouring basin and the little gate there, or trough? Now I'll separate the two halves. And these patterns are ready to remove. I have made a separate gate for the jaw, although it will all link up with the other one. Now I'll pull this one. I would appreciate a drum roll here that the bottom core portion does not break off. And it did not, so if you smell something, it's the odor of sweet success. I'd rather leave the patterns in there when I cut the risers, because there's a tendency for the sand to move in if you do not. So let's see what happens here. I'm going all the way down to the board. Same thing on this side. All right. Remember, Tom suggested a gate in both directions. All right, I'll deepen that just a little bit and then pull the patterns. Let's see how these jaws withdraw. I've already tapped on them. And I have enlarged these gates here quite a bit. I will blow that out real well, and that's ready to install. But I just had a thought. This casting is large enough with the risers that I may not have enough aluminum, and I hate to get halfway or 3/4 through the pour and I run out of molten aluminum, so I think I'll run a separate sprue for the jaw. That'll give me that extra edge just in case I need it. I don't know if it's worth the bother, but that's how I'm going to do it. And now the top and bottom half reunited. This is the sprue hole for the jaw. This is the pouring basin. There's the risers. You can see that some sand loosened up and fell out. And you know what, that's my fault. I tried to chinch there and I didn't use sand that was mulled. I was just using some sand out of the bin, and there was some charcoal in there, so that's kind of a mess. I hope it works. It's been about an hour and a half, and the whole thing is pretty darn hot. Even the sand on top. But I'm going to open it. Probably should wait a while, but I don't believe it matters. By the way, I did pour the aluminum at 1250 degrees. I checked it with my fire meter. I mean pyrometer. There's the jaw. It looks fine. I had some sand falling right there. You know, I haven't had castings in a long time where I've had this much loose sand fall into it. And this one it's really scrap. I got a big hole right here where the tongs is from a big blob of sand that came loose. Hot, hot. Whew. Is that hot? Other than that, I think it's a good usable casting, and I notice there's no shrinkage right here. By the way, Tom, thank you for all that you've done. No shrinkage here. That's what we're all worried about, or I was worried about, and you can see the whole gating system now, can't you? And the theory behind it. This is a riser, this is a riser, and the metal went both ways, and the shrinkage took place here and here. Now, whew, hot. And here's the major defect, which probably will cause me to have to scrap this, but a big piece of sand washed loose someplace, I'm not sure where, and lodged right there and left a cavity. This smaller stuff would machine out. They're there too. So I don't know where that was. These little areas here are supposed to trap some of the sand, but some of that sand could have come loose as I reassembled the mold. Now this could matter less. Remember, that's a very thin area, and that's all going to be machined out anyway. So that sometimes happens on a casting where I make sure that there isn't too much material left to machine, and you know that's fine. That's not going to hurt anything. Matter of fact, if none of this poured, and it would be just fine. I think that shows that the metal wasn't very hot in here. You can even see a little line here where it didn't fuse too well, but that's just great, really. Little bit of sand fell when I pulled the pattern right there, and that doesn't matter because that's going to be machined. I'll let that cool off, take it down the basement and cut the gates, and all of this of course can be recycled, remelted. Pretty successful. Matter of fact, the entire system that Tom suggested was very successful. This area here was due to the fact that I got careless or didn't blow it out or whatever. Alright, I've got this jaw cooled down so I can talk about it a bit. And remember, I isolated this and made it separate, but in my haste and because of the heat out there, I'm making excuses now on why I screwed it up. But you know, again, right here, there's a defect. That is sand that washed in there, but that's something I could live with if I was going to make the finished vise. You know, it's not all that bad. This could matter less because it's going to be machined. But look at this. There is considerable shrinkage right there. That won't really matter because this surface can be machined and there's going to be a hole drilled that'll end up right about there, and there'll be a jaw plate here, a steel jaw plate, so that would be covered. So it doesn't really matter, but let me tell you why. And I was so concerned with working on the big one that I just took this one for granted, but I didn't go back and open up the gate. You've seen me go in there with the spoon and at this point in the mold clean that out. Now the reason I do that is to enlarge it, but I didn't do that here, and you see how it's choked or necked down, so there's almost no connection there. Now watch this. See, I could break that right off and you can see how narrow that is. Now if it was much wider or larger, like let's say this, which is what it should have been, then this would have acted somewhat as a riser, and this would need to be thicker too, and it would have fed the casting so that the shrinkage would occur here. There's a little bit, but not much. So that explains that shrinkage. Okay, but still a usable casting. Another thing to reinforce what I just told you, I went out of all things and I cooled this in the bird bath so I could hold onto it, but I put just this in the bird bath. There was only that much water in there, and this got cool as a cucumber, but this was still hotter than a pistol because the heat really couldn't conduct very well through this choked little passage out into the bird bath water at, you know, where this was immersed. So that's kind of proof right there of how little conductivity there is in a small area compared to what I laid out in a pencil there. I know I'm telling you more than I should, so as soon as the other piece cools, I'll bring it down and talk about it. This is not the one I cast today. I did it the other day, and it is a good one. Other than I had some fall in there too, but it's still usable. There was quite a bit of sand that washed in there. You know what I really need to do? I need to take the time, mull all the sand, add a little oil, because the sand is not binding real well right now. So that's part of the problem. But I'm going to go over and saw this off. Remember, this was a different method of doing it than what Tom showed, but as far as I'm concerned, it was highly effective because you don't really see any shrinkage there. So let me step over to the bandsaw and saw these off, and I'll be back directly. Well, I'm still in the basement here, and I sawed off the gates here, and I drilled a 3/8 hole here just so you could truly see how thin that web is, and that's why it didn't fully pour in that other one, which was just fine because that's all going to be removed. And you know, with this split pattern, this really needs to be machined anyway because I do not like the looks of that the way I like the looks of this. This isn't a full-size one. I think that's the 90%er. But on this one, that's a bad one also. But that could be machined out if a fella had a notion. But this fellow does not have a notion to do it. But my point being that really on this one, there are 4 sides to be machined. 1, 2, 3, and 4. But not the ends. Really on this particular one, all 6 sides have to be machined. But I wouldn't want to take very much off of this. And I told Kevin to make these the same height. This is the same height as this, so that the vise can be used upside down, like on a bandsaw or something like that, and so that it would be easy to set it flat for some of the milling work while machining it. So I had several reasons for doing that, but it's not all of the commercial ones are made with that the same as that, but I like to make them that way. And you can see there doesn't seem to be any major porosity or problem here in the gates, maybe a little bit. I did forget to tell you I did not use any types of fluxes or metal cleaners or anything else. I just scraped the dross off. I don't use a whole lot of chemicals. Quite frankly, I wasn't in the mood. Okay, I truly will be back in a few moments with the actual casting. The main casting is almost cool. Yeah, it's still 120 degrees or something, but looking at it again before I cut these off, Tom, in the comments, tell me if you think that I made this or this runner here thick enough and large enough, or should it have been larger? Also, should I have had the gate into the casting from the riser even bigger? You can see that one's a little bit bigger than this side. Now I'll go ahead and saw these off so we can take another look. I want to insert one piece here real quickly, and remember I talked about this in the previous video. This didn't fall in. I did that on purpose. This fell in right here. But let me cut the gates off right now and talk about this one real briefly. That is not the one I cast today. I cut the gates off. Now on this one I've got some porosity there that I do not like. Hopefully that will clean up when it's machined. But that's a usable casting, even though there's a lot more to machine on this, but that doesn't really matter. Well, it takes longer, but that's a usable casting along with the jaw. So that one really is ready to go should I have a notion to do it. That's a slightly smaller one, as you can see. Alright, back to the real issue here. The gates and the risers are cut off. Now I know this looks pretty rough, but you got to consider that this will all be machined, so will this, so will the ends, in fact, and even the bottom, but not enough machined off to take out these 2 major sink spots. But it would be a usable casting. Again, I'm not sure that I will make a video on how to machine this. I do have all the drawings. Originally I intended to machine this small drill press vise. So thanks, Tom, for the help. And I do not, I said already, I guess, I do not intend to make another casting, at least not at this time, not today or tomorrow, that would be better. And it's a real struggle for me to handle that big 12 by 14 flask with 4-inch cope and 4-inch drag. That's why I made this one, even after Tom sent me the information, with the risers on the side, because I was able to use my small manageable flask so that even if I goofed one up, it wouldn't be such a horrendous job mentally to say, oh, I'll just make another one. This was a job because of the amount of sand that I had to process and pound and lift and everything. So that's why I am a little discouraged on this one, actually, but you know, it is what it is. So all right, leave some favorable comments if you have them, and this is tubalcain signing out, saying I'll see you in my next video.